What's up everyone, Bluebear here, and if today's video feels a little like deja vu, don't worry, because it kind of is. I've had to revamp the Raga Draga Gore Guts boss video I released a couple weeks ago because some of the information I gave was wrong, and a few of the cards in the original deck did not work how I thought they did. The mistake I made was in what counts as a mana ability as far as Raga Draga and the game itself goes. So why does that matter? Well, let me first start by telling you all about Raga Draga. It is a 1 green, 1 red, and 2 generic mana 4/4 legendary human boar with 3 pretty neat abilities. The first gives all creatures you control with a mana ability a static buff of +2/+2. The second ability states that whenever a creature you control with a mana ability attacks, you untap it. The third ability says that whenever you cast a spell, if at least 7 mana was spent to cast it, untap target creature, and it gets +7/+7 and trample until end of turn. As you can see, what clearly counts as a mana ability is kind of a big deal for this build, as it is the basis for the theme of the deck. So what I found out was with triggered abilities, like when a creature attacks, add some sort of mana, or landfall abilities that tell you to add mana when a land comes into play, do not count as a mana ability. The information I had researched said it was, but I have since talked to some judges and they clarified that they do not. The triggered abilities that do count are ones that are already adding mana but change how it does so, kind of like a wild growth type of effect does. Now, with that out of the way, I've made some adjustments to the build, so let me show you what the new deck looks like. I did keep it as a creature-heavy, mana dork tribal build with ways to use all that excess mana to your advantage. So let me start as I always do with the lands. Okay, so bear in mind we are on a budget. This is a budget deck, so the lands will reflect that. We start off with a Game Trail because it can come into play untapped if the right situation comes into play. Same thing with a Cinderglade, it can come into play untapped. Raging Ravine is the next card, and I actually have a couple of quote-unquote main lands in the deck. They all tap for mana, so they gain the ability when they become creatures through Raga Draga to get the +2/+2 buff. The Ravine I like because it becomes a 3/3 red and green elemental that has, whenever this creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, it starts as a 3/3. If you attack with it, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and if your commander, which is Raga Draga, is out, it's a 5/5 that gets a +1/+1 counter, making it a 6/6 right off the bat. So it's nice little fun there. Again, budget, so we're going to have budget, comes into play taps dual lands. So we've got Rugged Highlands, Kazandu Refuge, Racer's Rig for that extra draw ability, Timber Gorge, Gruul Guildgate, Thriving Bluff, and Thriving Grove. Obviously, you would pick the other color. Notvold Summermound. This is my way to put in a card that can destroy land without actually having to take up a land spot solely. So, it enters tapped, it taps to add a red, and then for this big amount here, which this deck doesn't mind, you can sacrifice it to destroy land and create a 4/4 green troll warrior creature token with trample. Crawling Barrens, another one of those man lands, quote-unquote, taps to add a colorless, and then you can pay 4 to put 2 counters, 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature that's still land. And remember, with Raga Draga out, the buff of +2/+2 means it starts at least as a 2/2 and gets 2 +1/+1 counters, making it a 4/4 on the first activation. Mistress Factory, again, another man land. It taps to add a colorless, and then you can pay 1 to make it become a 2/2 assembly worker. And then the last ability doesn't matter because this is commander and you can't have more than 1 of any non-basic land, so don't worry about that. Evolving Wilds for deck thinning. And then we've got an even amount here of Forests and Plains. I don't remember the exact amount, and as I always tell you in this section, the link for the actual deck list for what this deck is will be in the description of the video below. Next, we move on to the creature section. This will be divided up into 2 sections. The first section, which is very thick because this is a Mana Dork tribal deck, is going to be all the Mana Dorks. So let me go into what I've gotten here and what I've chosen. We start off on the colorless side with Ornithopter of Paradise. This was a change from the original deck. It's 2 to cast, it has flying, it's an 0/2, and it has tap to add a mana of any color, so it itself is mana fixing. We skipped the ramp section of this build because all the creatures are the ramp, so we'll just, go with that. Automated Artificer, 2 to cast 1/3 that taps to add a colorless, but you can only spend that mana on abilities or to cast an artifact spell, and luckily we have some abilities in this deck that it can be used for, and a couple of artifacts. Cradle Clearcutter, 6 to cast, 3/6, that you can instead prototype it for 3 to come into play as a 1/3, and it taps to add a green mana to your mana pool equal to its power. So if you've prototyped it, it only adds 1. If you didn't and you hard cast it for the normal 6, it can tap to add 3, and with Raga Draga out, you add 2 to each of that because it will buff its power. Llanowar Elves, we're going to have 3 of these, so Llanowar Elves, an Elvish Mystic, and a Fyndhorn Elves because, it's just their inherent nature to be in a deck like this. Jaspera Sentinel, it's a 1 to cast 1/2 with reach. That was important. I have very little flying or protection from flying in this deck, so I wanted to add a little bit more that fit the theme, and this fit the theme very well, because its ability to tap for mana kind of sucks. You have to tap it and another untapped creature you control to add a mana of any color, and that could be useful for other cards that don't tap for mana and don't matter if they're tapped or not, but the reach was important, and with your commander out in this one, it is a 3/4, which is helpful. Tangled Florahedron, so it's a 2-cast 1/1 that taps to add a green, and then if you really need the land instead, if it's in your opening hand and you had a 2-land hand and a Florahedron in your hand as well, you can at least play it for the land instead. Orochi Sustainer, it's just a 2-cast 1/2 that taps to add a green. Naga Vitalist, it's a 2-cast 1/2 that taps to add a mana of any color to mana pool. That is a type of that a land you control could produce, and hopefully if you have like one of the dual lands in play, you can tap that either red or green. Reclusive Taxidermist, it's a 2-cast 1/2 that taps to add a mana of any color to mana pool, which is helpful. However, remember that the buff from Ragged Drag is +2/+2, and he has his own built-in ability to buff himself. He gets +3/+2 as long as there are 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard. And remember, this is a very creature-heavy deck, so you may have that anyway. So if you add it all up, his own ability without Ragged Drag out makes it a 4/4, and then the buff from Ragged Drag would make it a 6/6. Armored Scrapegorger. This was a newer addition as well from the previous one that I had to delete. It's a 2-cast 0/3 that also gets a buff. It gets +3/+0 as long as there are 3 or more oil counters on it. And there is no real interaction in this deck with oil counters. It's its own interaction. So it taps to add a mana of any color, but it also has whenever it becomes tapped, you can exile a card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on it. So it's actually a little bit of its mana ramp. It fits the theme of the deck, and it actually is a little bit of graveyard exiling, so that could be helpful against some decks, like a Muldroth or something like that. Orochi Merge Keeper, it's a 2-cast 1/1 that taps to add a green. It has also, as long as it's modified, it can tap to add 2 green. So there isn't a lot of interaction with that, but there are some things in here that could interact with it later. Leafkin Druid, it's a 2-cast 0/3 that taps to add a green, but if you control 4 or more creatures, it taps to add 2 green, and the next 2 cards will do something similar. Whisper of the Wilds, 2-cast 0/2 taps to add a green, but it has Ferocious, which means it taps to add 2 green, and you can only activate that ability if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, and that shouldn't be a problem in this deck if you have the commander out. Lucian Caryatid, same thing, it's similar to the previous card. It's 2-cast 1/1, it taps to add a mana of any color instead of just green, but if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it can tap to add 2 mana of any color instead. Weaver of Blossoms is a 3-cast 2/3 that taps to add a mana of any color. It's got the Daybound, Nightbound cycle on it, because it is a werewolf. So the other side, you can start the cycle going when this card comes into play, and it taps to add 2 mana of any color instead. Any one color. Galana, or Jelana, I don't know how you say it, Caller of the Wirewood. It's a 3-cast 1/2 that taps to add a green, and when you spend this mana to cast a spell with converted mana cost 6 or greater, you can draw a card, and there is a combo in here that's infinite that if you use Galana to be part of that, you can draw a card off of it, because it's quite expensive. Viridian Joiner, this is an important one too, just like the one that prototypes. It's a 30-cast 1/2 that taps to add an amount of green to your mana pool equal to its power, and those are the important ones. So if you have something that you want to protect the ones that add mana equal to their power, because they are going to be what gets you your infinite, which I'll explain later. Karametra's Acolyte, it's a 40-cast 1/4, so a big butt helps you defensively, and it taps to add an amount of green equal to your devotion to green. Dawnheart Rejuvenator, it is a 40-cast 2/4. When it enters, you gain 3 life and just taps to add a mana of any color. Orcish Lumberjack, it's a 1-cast 1/1. Its ability is a mana ability, I did have to look that up, and you have to sacrifice a forest to use it, but you add 3 mana in any combination you choose between red or green, so it could be very useful as far as mana fixing goes. Goldhound is a 1-cast 1/1 First Striking Menace that is also a treasure, so it inherently has the ability to sacrifice itself to add a mana. That does count as a mana ability, so it will get the buff from your commander here. Grinning Ingus is a weirder one. It actually doesn't benefit from the buff as it's in play if you use the mana ability, but let me explain. It's a 3-cast 2/2 that you can pay a red and return it to your hand to add a red and 2 generic mana to your mana pool. The reason why this is in here is A, it does get the buff from your commander in this build, but B, this actually does, if somebody buys this and they want to upgrade the deck a little, this does actually happen to be part of an infinite combo. So I have it in there for a placeholder for a possible infinite for later. Up next is Elena Kessig Trapper. It is 5 to cast for a 4/3 First Striker that taps to add an amount of red equal to the greatest power among creatures you control that entered the battlefield this turn. And there is some use out of this. You can't tap her unless she has haste for some reason on the turn she comes into play to add 4 red. But there are other ways that you can utilize her, and I have that in the deck. You will see it as it unfolds. The first gold mana dork I have in here is Zertod Druid. It's 2 to cast for a 1/1. It taps to add a green, and whenever it's tapped for mana, it deals damage to each opponent, so it helps whittle down opponents' life totals, which is important. Now, the only thing I don't have in here is a way to continually tap and untap this card. There are things you can do. I just didn't do that for this deck. Draconic Disciple, it's a 3 to cast 2/2 that taps to add a mana of any color. So as you can see, there were a lot of mana dorks in here that tapped to add a mana of any color. So that was the way of mana fixing as well, besides dual lands. It also has an ability to pay 7, tap it, and sack it to create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying, if in case that, you have that need to make a flyer and a big one. That's just bonus. And the last mana dork will be Leafkin Avenger. It's a 4 to cast 4/3. It taps to add a green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. And then it has its own ability built in that is a mana sink, and that's important to remember. Mana sink is coming up next, so let me go over this section real quick. The mana sink for this one is if you pay 7 into it, so 1 red and 7 of any, it deals damage equal to its power to any to target player or planeswalker. So it itself, if you have enough mana, or even infinite if you can get there, it can be a game ender. So keep that in mind for the next section, because we're going to go into all the utility stuff. These are the utility creatures. These are creatures that either provide mana sinks or do something fun or interesting. First up, another new addition from the previous version is Welder Automaton. It's a 2 to cast 2/1 artifact creature that for each 4 you put into it, because it's colon and not tapped, so for each 1 red and 3 generic you put into it, it deals a damage to each opponent. So at that point, you just need 40 to be able to do it 40 times. Shouldn't be hard, right? Drop the card. Next up is Flamekin Spitfire. It's a 2 to cast 1/1 that is sort of similar to the card I just showed you. The difference is that for every 4 you pay into it, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player and not each opponent. So it works just the same. Valakut Invoker, another mana sink. It's a 3 to cast 2/3 that for every 8 you put into it, it deals 3 damage to a creature or player. You can see where I'm going with that. It's the mana sinks for all that extra mana you're going to be able to create. Cinder Elemental, it's a 4 to cast 2/2 that is basically it's a fireball on a stick. It's basically a fireball. Actually, fireball can be split. So Disintegrate. No, because Disintegrate removes them from the game. Anyway, it's an X spell on a stick. So you can keep it as a creature. It has no actual ability with Raga Draga out. However, all that mana you have, you can actually just sink into this. You pay the X, you pay the 1 red, you tap it and sack it, and it deals X damage to target creature or player. So it's player removal. The last mana sink is Wildheart Invoker. So this is for all intents and purposes, tribal deck. It's Mana Dork Tribal, and it will use combat to win. That's the main focus of the deck, and then those mana sinks and those abilities to do damage with mana are just an addition. The Invoker has a great ability here. It's a 4 to cast 4/3. For each 8 you put into it, you can give target creature +5/+5 and trample, so that when you're doing all that combat, you can actually make your creatures not just survive, but hit harder. And with trample, it's quasi-evasion. The next 2 cards are the same card, but on different colors and with somewhat, little different abilities. It's Embodiment of Insight and Embodiment of Fury. So let me tell you about the red one. The green one will be similar. The red one is a 4 to cast 4/3 Trampler that gives land creatures you control trample, and has a landfall ability that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have target land you control become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn, and it's still a land. So with it being a land, it has the ability to tap for mana. Almost everything, if not minus the Evolving Wilds in this deck, can tap for mana. So it has the ability to be buffed by Raga Draga. So it's a 3/3. It would be a 5/5 with your commander out. It also has trample. And then with Embodiment of Insight, you can give it Vigilance. So it's the same stuff as the Fury one, except for it costs 1 more to cast. It's a 4/4. It has Vigilance, and it gives all your land creatures Vigilance. So I have another card in here that will make it so that your lands become creatures, because they all get the buff from your commander. So this will be very useful for that if that's the way you end up going. Anger is pure utility. It's a 4 to cast 2/2 with haste, and it's not in here for the fact that it's a 2/2 haster. Its ability to, when it's in the graveyard and you control a mountain, it gives all of your creatures haste. That's why it's in here. You want this in your graveyard. And the last one, again, I mentioned earlier, this is the last creature in this section. It's my quasi-budget, Craterhoof. So it's 8 to cast. It's a 7/7 Vigilance, Trample, Haste. And when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. This is my combat-based game ender. So that's how you're going to do it. Up next, we're going to go over 5 different sections of different utility stuff. This will be all the spells. It'll be destroying things. It'll be drawing cards. It'll be buffing stuff. It's pure utility. So why don't I just get into it? We're going to go over the defensive stuff first. So we're going to destroy things in this section. So Naturalize for artifacts and enchantments. Return to nature for artifacts, enchantments, and possibly exiling a card from a graveyard, which we have a creature that helps do that as well. Crushing Canopy for that, defense from flying or an enchantment. Reclaiming Vines will destroy either an artifact, an enchantment, or a land. So I have a redundant card in this deck that destroys a land, and that's not for any reason other than it's just for pure redundancy. I can do it in green, so it was nice. Desert Twister can destroy any permanent on the board. Always nice to be able to do that. Shattering Pulse is a buybackable artifact remover. So with the amount of mana you can create in this deck, if somebody's playing a purely artifact deck, which there are some out there, this is like a shotgun for you. You can just keep repeatedly destroying an artifact in play. Ancient Grudge destroys an artifact, then you can flash it back for green. Smash to Smithereens, also an artifact removal. It's 2 to cast at instant speed and deals 3 damage to the artifact's controller. And the last one is a newer addition. I think I have a video that I mentioned this in, but if not, I'll do it again. Fissure is one of the newer cards I'm going to start using in red decks because it destroys a land or a creature, no caveats. The casting cost is high, but in a deck like this, casting cost doesn't matter because you're all mana dorks. You should be able to cast it. It's at instant speed, which is even nicer. So I like this card a lot. I will be using it more in the future for pure creature removal in red, not just damage-based, okay? The next set of utility cards will be the card draw. I don't have any way to do any graveyard recursion, so I didn't want to use looting effects from red, so I used greens. Green has stuff like this, Adventurous Impulse. All of them look at the top X cards of your library, depending on which card you play, and they put something into your hand. It's not card draw per se, it's kind of gets around card draw effects, but it puts cards in your hands. So Adventurous Impulse looks at 3, and you can reveal a creature or land, and put that in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. Seek the Wilds looks at 4 cards, you can reveal a creature or land, and put the rest on the bottom of your library. Track Down, it's a little different. It scries 3. You reveal the top card of your library, and if it was a creature or land card, you can draw that card. Warm Welcome looks at top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library and create a 1/1 citizen token. The important part is not the token, but it's always nice to have a little extra blocker. And Gifts of the Gargantuan. It's 3 to cast. You look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you may reveal a creature and or a land. So if you get a creature and a land in those 4 cards, you can put both in your hand. And the last one is Beast Hunt. It's 4 to cast, and you reveal the top 3 cards of your library, and you put all creatures that were revealed this way into your hand. So I actually tested this deck out with my son, and when I played it, I whiffed and got no creatures because my shuffle was bad. Always shuffle your deck very well on the first one at least. All right? The next section for utility will be creature buffs, and not necessarily just power and toughness buffs, but ways to give keyword abilities as well. So we start off with Storm the Citadel. It's 5 to cast sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +2/+2, and gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker. Destroy target artifact or enchantment that the defending player controls. The second part, not so important unless, of course, you're playing against like an Enchantress deck or an artifact-based deck. It's the buff that I was looking for here, to make your little mana dorks who get a little buff from Raga Draga a little bit bigger. Overwhelm, it convokes. It's 7 to cast, but it convokes. And then, I mean, you're not really going to use the Convoke in this deck unless, of course, your non-mana dorks are out in play. You're basically going to use your mana dorks for that anyway. But it gives creatures you control +3/+3 until end of turn, so a little bit more buffing. And then the king of that is Overrun. So it's 5 to cast, and then creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. So remember, this is a combat-based deck, as I've said. So you want to at least get those guys on your board to be bigger and bigger and bigger. Goblin War Drums. Wall of text here. All that's basically saying is your creatures have menace. If you want to read the card, go ahead. It's very small, and I even have a problem reading it. But basically, if you look it up on one of the official sites, it just says your creatures have menace. Fires of Yavimaya gives your creatures haste, and then if you're in a bind, you can sacrifice it to give a creature +2/+2. Goblin War Chant. It's 4 to cast enchantment that gives each attacking creature you control a buff of +1/+0 and menace. So I wanted to make your guys as hard to block as possible within the confines of red-green. And the last creature buffer is going to actually be this Planeswalker Samut Tyrant Smasher. It's 4 to cast, comes into play with 4 loyalty counters, and it gives all your creatures haste. And then you can downtick it to give target creature +2/+1 in haste, and scry 1 if you want. The next utility section will go over ways to use all that mana that aren't built into the creatures that you have. So we're going to go with Burn. We're going to burn, baby, burn. First up, Fireball. It's splittable, so you can take full advantage of all that extra mana you have. Conflagrate. It's double X, so if anybody needs double X, actually explain to them. For every 2 mana you put in, you get 1 mana out of the X. So if you pay 1 red and 2, you get 1 damage. If you pay 1 red and 4, you get 2 damage, and so on. All right, and this one does X damage divided amongst any number of targets. So whatever your damage is, you can divide it up, and it can be flashed back, so you can use it again. Rolling Thunder. So this is 2 red and X, and you can just divide the damage up amongst any number of creatures or players. And the last one is Fanning the Flames. This is where the infinite combo starts. Fanning the Flames with Raga Draga out, and one of the creatures that adds mana to your mana pool where it's equal to its power, that's where the infinite combo goes. Raga Draga has the last ability that gives a creature +7/+7 and untaps it, and that's how that combo will work. If you want me to fully explain it, just send me a message and I will, but those are the cards that you need to make an infinite combo work, all right? And then we got the last 2 cards of the deck. We're going to go over their utility as well. Living Lands, it says all forests become 1/1 creatures, and they will count as lands. So this is just for fun. It's to overrun the board, literally and figuratively, because you can overrun, and then, you know, if this is out, all your lands are also 1/1s that, if Raga Draga is out, they're 3/3s, and then if you overrun, they get +3/+3. You get what I'm saying. It's just for fun. If you want to take it out when you get it, that's fine, but I think it would be a fun way to win. The last card is just pure utility to put on Ragged Draga so it can't be targeted. This is one of my newer ways to give hexproof to our commander. Swiftfoot Boots and, Lightning Greaves, they're a little expensive. This is my budget way of doing it. It's Mirror Shield, it's 2 to cast, it equips for 2. I used to use Mask of Avacyn. This one actually ends up being better in some ways. The equipped creature gets +0/+2 and hexproof, which is important. And then whenever a creature with Death Touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, destroy it. So don't care about the Death Touch part. For me, it was about the +0/+2 and the hexproof. So that's what I've chosen to help protect your commanders going forward. That's what you'll be seeing in a lot of my decks. And that, folks, is my new and actually working Ragged Draga Goreguts Boss Precon style commander build. The deck should actually work as intended now, and possibly even a little better than the original one I presented you with a few weeks ago. With multiple ways to win, this deck is a blast to play. One quick side note though, you may have noticed that there was no upgrade guide for this video like I usually do for my Precon style budget commander builds, and there is a good reason. In the interest of saving time, I've decided to cut them from these videos, and instead, I would just give suggestions when asked in the comments going further. This should help cut the length of my videos down by quite a bit, while also giving me more time to build even more fun and unique decks that I can present to you on this very channel. I apologize if you don't like the change, but I enjoy making decks for people more than anything else, and I believe this will lead to better videos going forward. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching, and as always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or concerns, or you just want to talk or chat about any of the videos I put out, you can do so using any of the methods I have displayed here. Additionally, if you would like to support the channel, you can do so in 3 ways. Donations are accepted and greatly appreciated. I have 3 methods with which you can do so displayed on the screen, and keep in mind that no amount is too small. If donations aren't your thing, and you would like to get something for your money, that's great too. I sell a lot of the decks I present on the channel, as well as mystery packs. So, if you're interested in any of these, you can contact me using the information I have up on your screen right now. Directly contacting me is usually the best and cheapest way to do so, but you can always look at what I currently have available on the Facebook Marketplace. And lastly, if you want to show your love and support for the channel, but like myself, are a little strapped for cash, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, watch some videos and give them a like, and possibly share them out on your social medias you use to help spread my content to more people. No matter what way you choose is greatly appreciated and will help support the channel, and I thank you for it. Sadly, that is all the time I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and please, stick around and watch some of the many great videos I've posted over the last few years, and remember to check back again for new content I'll be posting every week. Have a great day.